The following podcast may contain material not suitable for children. Listener discretion is advised.
If you follow this show, you know we don't typically cover politics, at least not directly. We're all about democracy and people choosing issues and candidates that reflect their values and needs. But this season we have shined more of a spotlight on politicians because we're living in unprecedented times. In Ohio especially, the makeup of the state's demographics isn't reflected in our legislature. Gerrymandering, identity politics, misinformation, and corruption have paved the way for an imbalance that doesn't reflect anyone's values or needs, other than the ultra-wealthy and those in their pockets. Allison Russo, currently an Ohio State Representative, is running for Secretary of State, a role that's pivotal in keeping Ohio elections fair for everyone. Not Democrats, not Republicans, not independents. Everyone. In our going there fashion, we don't just want to hear the talking points and campaign speeches. We want to know who each candidate is as a person, as a parent, a neighbor, a coworker, and a citizen. We want to joke with them, share some heartfelt stories, and see the humanity that's going to guide their decisions moving forward. So we cracked open the book from the Zach Galifianakis School of Journalism and invited her for a semi-tongue-in-cheek conversation full of candor and authenticity while she still remained in that space between two terms.
Ladies and gentlemen, keep your arms and legs inside the car at all times, cause we're going there.
No, you didn't.
Taboo topics are back on the table.
Welcome back, everyone, to another Season 3 episode of the Going There podcast. I'm your host, Matt, and we are very excited to introduce today's guest.
I'm Allison Russo, state representative in the Columbus area, and I am running for Ohio Secretary of State.
According to IMDb, you were in some of the Lethal Weapon movies. Did Mel Gibson make Danny Glover use a separate drinking fountain?
Wrong, Russo, but I often get mistaken as her sister.
Oh, yeah, because it says Renee. Oh, you're not Renee Russo.
Not Renee.
That's going to really mess up a bunch of my next questions. So I'm going to need a minute to collect my notes. Why don't you spend that time telling us a little bit about your background? Where did you grow up? Rural Mississippi, is that right?
Yeah, so I am not an Ohio native. I grew up, I say, not Southern Ohio, not Kentucky. You just keep on driving further south. I was born and raised in Mississippi and grew up in a very small town. My small town creds are real because I had 35 people in my graduating class, K through 12, in the same building. And grew up in we didn't have a lot of money or resources. My mom was a single mom for the first part of my childhood. And, she did a lot of odds and end jobs to make ends meet, and got an opportunity to be an apprentice through the Carpenters Union. And so she worked construction for a number of years and was often the only woman on the construction job sites.
In the South.
In the South, in the 80s, in the heat. So, I'm sure you can imagine she is a very tough broad. And eventually, she worked her way through to earn her college degree, go on to other work. But she felt very strongly for us that our pathway to opportunity would be through education. So I am a proud product of public schools through and through. My children, I have 3 children, products of public school as well. And I worked for 20 plus years. My background is in public health policy, doing the most non-political things ever. I call myself the accidental politician. And through a series of events, ended up running for office for the first time in 2018, won, and started serving in the legislature in 2019.
Your background's in public health. A really important question I have is Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil, or Dr. Seuss, who's more qualified to give medical advice?
Most definitely Dr. Seuss.
I agree. Okay, so one of these cards actually played well. RFK, is he not the most brilliant medical advisor that you've ever seen in your life?
I would say no.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well then,
not a lot there between the ears.
What brought you to Ohio?
I married a guy that I met shortly after college who was Air Force. And so we moved around quite a bit and moved overseas, moved around the country. And we were back in Washington, D.C. for a while. When we started to have children, we wanted to come be somewhere that was not the DC area, and he had family here in Ohio, and so it really checked all the boxes for us, Columbus in particular, and we ended up in Columbus, Ohio, and the rest is history, and we stayed. We weren't even sure if we were going to stay for longer than a few years, but we loved it so much and loved our community so much, and here I am.
For better or worse, Ohio is like molasses. It doesn't want to let you go.
That is true. And in fact, since we have been here, there have been additional family members that have moved to Ohio. So we are growing the population here single-handedly.
Well, thank goodness, because I know one of our biggest exports is young people who want to move on out of here because of the lack of opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. And I have my oldest now is in college, and that's a discussion we have quite a bit. Is what will be his plans after? Does he want to be in Ohio? Does he want to be somewhere else? I suspect he will be somewhere else for a little while, but hopefully we can bring him back to Ohio.
And I love that Ohio is your home. So your husband, he must have been active military,
he was active duty. Yeah.
Was he not aware that you can get out of that by pretending to have bone spurs?
Well, he didn't use that excuse. He just did his service and did it proudly.
Oh, well, that's a really good
thing. I know,
thing.
Novel concept, right?
That's novel.
Yeah.
Like you said, you were the accidental politician. You had a background that was in a lot of ways removed from it. But as we're seeing, there's this uptick in people basically saying, I can't just watch this anymore. If you rewind 10 years or so, most people couldn't name anybody in the president's cabinet, right? They could name the president, maybe the vice president, your average person. Now everybody is almost too aware of what's going on. Unfortunately, not aware enough about what's going on at the State House, which we can get into. But what really, not bone spurred, but what spurred you to get into politics?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting transition into what spurred me to get into politics. For me, the defining moment was really election night on 2016. Up to this point, I would describe myself as a very engaged and informed voter, like many people. Certainly having been a military family, moving around, we were those people who had to cast our vote from overseas and from out of state, really understood the power of voting and why it was so important in our civic duty to do it. But on election night in 2016, my youngest child, my daughter, was only 6 weeks old, so I was up with a newborn, watching those election results come in, and very concerned about what I saw and what that might mean for not only the future of the country, but my rights, her rights. And I had this real moment where I made a promise to her and to myself. I would never again stay on the sidelines. It was not enough to just be an engaged and informed voter. I had no idea what that was going to mean, but I just knew that I had to do more. And I think many people had that same awakening. And you saw many women, especially across the country, step up and run for office for the first time, beginning in 2017 and in 2018. For me, because of my background in healthcare and the work that I had been doing, I began connecting with fellow community members. There was a lot happening in Congress and at the Ohio State House in the healthcare space in terms of, removing the Affordable Care Act, rolling back Medicaid expansion, that would cause a lot of people to lose their health insurance and lose healthcare coverage. And I started using my expertise to really help people better advocate for those issues to their elected members of Congress and the legislature. And in 2018, at the beginning of 2018, the gentleman who was my state representative, who was a Republican. He decided to run for a judicial seat, which meant that the seat was going to be open. And someone said, you should run for that seat. And I said, you are out of your mind. I'm a mom with 3 kids. We're very busy. I have a toddler. I have boys who play travel hockey. We are all over the place. This is the worst possible timing for me to do anything new and take on anything new. But I remember that promise that I made to myself and my daughter in November of 2016. And I thought, you know what, I have to get off the sidelines and I have to do something. And so that's what I did. And I decided to run for office. Had no idea what I was doing. At first, it was literally me and a couple of my mom friends, because we knew how to connect with people in our community. And I called it the multi-level marketing strategy for campaigning. And it was a bunch of house parties and getting other people to host house parties. And by the time I was done with that election, we had knocked on 45,000 doors, my team, massive team of volunteers that we were able to bring in. And I won that election and flipped that seat. And the rest is history.
That's awesome. So how sad were you when Biden stole the election in 2020?
Well, as 60 court rulings have proven, 60 plus over and over again, Biden won that election fairly.
Oh, well, according to Truth Social, that's not the truth, but I don't know. I guess I'll have to go with your word for it.
Yeah.
So as not just a mother, but a mother of a daughter, how do you have conversations with them now, 10 years down the road? A man who has said certain things, grab him by the you-know-what, the Epstein files, the way that's being handled. How do you have that conversation where you are preparing them for the future without completely jading them or trying to turn them into a puppet of your design?
Yeah.
Right? How do you do that balancing act as a mom?
Well, it's a great question. Now, my youngest, my daughter, who is now 9, there are a lot of conversations that we don't have with her at this point, but really she has only known me as someone who goes to work at the state
She only
house.
knows Supermom.
Who's
the older
on,
kids are like, who the hell is this person?
It's totally normal that mom is on the news sometimes, or that, she spends some of her weekends, going to campaign events and getting all the free snacks that she could possibly want. That's totally normal to her. She really knows nothing different. And it's really cute because she loves to carry around a clipboard as well. She's on the road with me quite a bit. And one day we were walking to school and she said, Mom, we should collect some petitions to put sidewalks, because we don't have sidewalks on our street that connects to the street we have to walk to for school. And I said, yeah, that's great. That's something you should do. So she's already sort of putting those pieces
that's
together.
That's civic-minded.
I know. So that's my daughter. My boys who have, gone from elementary school sort of seeing this over the last, I'm in my 8th year of service. I have one who's in college now, one who is a 10th grader. They have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with this work because it's very public. And they know that I'm in the public. And so I try to be as protective of them and their privacy as possible. But it is interesting. And my husband and I have always felt very strongly that, we have our values and we share our values with our children, but we want them to be critical thinkers and to come to conclusions on their own. And so we do a lot of back and forth questioning at the dinner table and in other circumstances because, they're kids and they're getting information from, especially as young boys, information from a variety of different places and things that they hear at school and things that they see online. And so we're always, questioning. We're just questioning, well, why do you think that way? Where did you hear that? What do you, getting them probing constantly so they, come to the
and you
conclusion
allow
that they're.
It sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like you allow for that, to me, necessary curiosity.
Yes.
And for them to even challenge some of the things that you
That's
say.
right. Well, in fact, one of their favorite things to do when we were all together, my teenage boys, they call it rage baiting. Let's rage bait mom and see how far we can take it. And I mean, it's almost comical because they will parrot things that they know and they see that are so, the most ridiculous things. And I know that they're doing it, but it creates the sort of debate and forces them to defend a position that they may not necessarily hold. So, and I think that's good. That's good for them. That's healthy debate. Honestly, that's, all children and young adults should have that experience to really, think critically about issues and come to their conclusions.
The thing that is missing in our modern media and politics that are front and center, I'm not saying it as an absolute, is civil discourse, where you're going into the conversation with an openness and willingness to hear and learn from the other person, not just to make a point. They have those Jubilee videos that most of us have seen at least clips from, and there's very little curiosity in that room. It's all my point versus your point. There, at least some people are willing to concede on certain things, but there is no curiosity anymore.
Right.
It's no longer, how can we see from the other person's point of view? I don't know what the intentions were behind that, but, when you have a doctor sitting down, for example, with a bunch of anti-vaxxers, I don't hate anti-vaxxers. I understand why some people have a distrust of the medical community.
That's right.
Especially if you're Black, of a certain age, if you have mental health issues of your past.
That's right.
However, I just see a bunch of people saying, no, you're wrong, screw you, you go sit down. And I feel like the system's broken. And I think that very much is taking its cues from what we're seeing at a federal level and from a national level in the media.
Well, and I think this all gets exacerbated by social media and algorithms. And, people get in their silos in that, an algorithm is only feeding you the information that reaffirms what your set of beliefs may be. And it's doing that intentionally. And I think, it's driving us further apart as people and as a country. But I really worry about it in terms of young people, especially younger boys and young men, as sometimes, we're becoming more isolated as well. Those connections that are being made primarily through social media or online gaming platforms or, whatever the case may be, again, is it creating these extremes in a more accelerated way? We talk a lot about both, me in terms of being someone who serves a community, but also with my own children, about the importance of bring conversations offline, have conversations with people who disagree with you, be around people who are different than you and who may not share the same opinion. Because that is good for all of us in terms of discourse, but also gives us connections to people. And, going back to, how my husband and I first started our marriage was in a military environment where you have people who come from all different backgrounds from all across the country. Some folks who are serving this country who aren't from the United States. And, if it's an environment where you are forced, it's one of the few places still in America where you are forced to work together with people who do not necessarily share the same background. And I think that has informed both my husband and I and how we, approach the world, but also, those values that we try to instill in our own children.
You had mentioned there's a love-hate relationship that your older kids have with you in public service. One of our mutual friends and colleagues, Casey Weinstein, and his wife have both been on the show a few times. And one of the major reasons why I was first introduced to him is that was when the very big anti-Semitic outlash was happening. We watched it happen on January 6th, and then we watched a bunch of local things happening. Are your kids being dragged into some of those types of things where the mudslinging has gotten way worse and more real, more of a real threat, I think?
So Casey and I have known each other. Well, we started serving together. We both came into the legislature at the same time. So, and we have kids are my youngest
Air
daughter.
Force.
Yeah,
You
both
guys
Air
have a-
Force.
you guys
yeah,
have a lot
he went to
in
the Air
common.
Force Academy. My husband
He
went
was
to the academy
Columbus,
as
yeah.
well. Yeah, so we have a lot of connections, and we talk a lot about our kids and this work that we do. I would say we have been very careful, especially the online discourse, which is such a toxic place, especially in politics.
He's
the online
mastered
discourse.
it, though, by the way.
Yes, he has. Like he's
I'm just
he's
saying,
much better at it than I am.
He's much better.
He takes it head on.
And so cool.
I tend to,
Yeah.
not give it life as much as possible. And, neither approach is right or wrong.
No,
it's just
right.
different styles that we have. For me, especially for my kids, and even my husband, we have encouraged them to stay off of those platforms. I mean, certainly my older kids are now much more, they're on Instagram and, some of the same platforms. But to stay as far away from that as possible, not give it life or spend energy on it. My husband is actually not on social media at all, which is kind of a miracle. He's like this rare breed.
I'm so jealous of him. I am so jealous.
I don't know
of
how
him.
he's managed to do this for so long, but I am actually very thankful for that as a spouse. Because I think especially as a spouse, it's really, really hard not to be super protective and defensive.
Yes. You end up fighting other people's battles more than your own. You call me a jerk, I laugh it off. You call my spouse a jerk.
That's right. And it's just, don't give a life.
Them's fighting words down in Mississippi.
That's right. Yeah. So he hears about it, if something has upset me or something is going on. But you can also be a little removed from it, which is helpful.
Yes.
Because it gives me perspective. When I think something is a really big deal, he's like, yeah, nobody cares about that. Nobody's paying attention.
Perspective
to that.
is great.
Yeah.
And that's what social media actually takes you away from. You talk about being in the silo with the algorithm, this echo chamber. I have a journalism background, and I realize the importance of a diverse portfolio of media and information coming to you.
That's right.
If everyone's telling me I'm right, I realize the whole system's broken.
Yeah.
I know I'm not right all the time. I know my opinion needs challenged left and right. So, being in that bubble isn't good for you no matter what. And I love that you said that there needs to be discussion and discourse with people who don't agree with you, because this show was birthed out of the idea that we were told, hey, Thanksgiving's coming up. Mm-hmm. Let's not talk politics. I don't want to hear the word vaccine. I don't want to hear this or that. And my mantra has always been, not talking about that stuff doesn't bring us closer together. It actually pushes us farther apart.
Right. Yeah.
We can disagree, but like the military, you can have all these people disagree, but they have one common goal. Mm-hmm. And that common goal is what I see dissolving in our modern day. It used to be, we want our children taken care of and educated. We want the people who can't take care of themselves taken care of. We want to take care of the needy, the poor. We want to make sure that the middle class survives. We used to talk about all of the same things. We might get there differently. That list of to-dos, we might put it in a different order. But now I guess my point is to say, I agree 100%. But there are, sadly, for the first time ever, I think some people are admitting some lost causes. Not entire groups of people, but there are people who are so dug in that until that they reconcile with that themselves, there is no getting through to them. And unfortunately, so many good people have wasted their time, breath, and energy trying to get through to them. But there's still so many people who are fence sitters who know I don't have all the answers. I would love to hear somebody else. It's that curiosity. I think that is so important to look for in somebody else. Are they just arguing with me to make their point, or do they actually want to hear what I'm saying?
Yeah. And listen, I think that there are more of those people who are genuinely curious.
I agree.
And want to hear other perspectives. I do think that there are more of those than, you're right. There are many people who are dug in, and I don't know how we reach them, but I do know that without connections to people in community and this social contract that we have to each other, we have to hold on to that. That's what makes us Americans. That's what keeps us connected. And we're not going to be able to solve some of these big problems without that. And I acknowledge, many of these people who are very dug in and highly skeptical, especially as it relates to government, there is reason to be distrustful. It has failed many people in many different ways.
Yeah.
Or a healthcare system has failed many people in many different ways. And that distrust is warranted. And it's, first of all, we have to acknowledge those failures and figure out, how are we going to move forward? How are we going to offer solutions to move forward to fix that? But, it starts with having conversations. And, I always tell people the most important leadership skill that anyone can have is listening.
Yeah.
You got to shut up and just listen to what people are actually trying to tell you. Why did they feel that way? Because if you listen and you ask questions instead of trying to defend your position, and it's hard. I mean, trust me, I work in a state house where I hear some crazy perspectives on things, and it is hard. But when you start asking questions and you just listen, you ultimately will get down to what the root of the concern is.
Yeah.
And you probably can find some agreement on, yes, this is a problem. Let's just figure out what is the solution that, we can come to that makes sense for both of us.
A lot of times it's, so actually this is because of this thing that's totally unrelated to what you're fighting.
Yes.
It takes a lot of empathy and courage and, divine energy to continually do that. So thank goodness there are people like yourself and Casey and others who are willing to do that work, because that might be the hardest work. And how you keep your sanity intact is beyond me.
Sometimes that doesn't always happen.
No. And
there are moments where I think, why are we doing this? This is nuts.
But you're human. And I think the humanity is what's been lost, is that public image of perfection. For example, our president has never once admitted he made a mistake.
Yeah.
He's pointed out other people have. He's pushed it off onto somebody else. There's never been an admission of guilt.
Yeah, well, that narcissists rarely admit their own flaws, but yes.
Okay, so you are going to help us by hopefully entering into a new position. I have it written here. It's administrative assistant to the state.
No, Secretary of State.
You're not allowed to say that. That's sexist.
Okay. Well, Secretary of State. I don't deal with foreign countries either as Ohio Secretary of State.
Realistically, I think a lot of people have no idea what a Secretary of State does.
Yes, and a lot of people think that you're going to be a foreign dignitary. That is not with the Ohio Secretary of State. The Ohio Secretary of State is the state's chief elections officer. So is responsible for ensuring that there are fair and free elections across our state, working with all 88 county boards of elections.
Do we want fair and free?
Of course we want fair and free elections. I want fair and free elections.
Okay, got it. Okay.
I don't assume everyone does, but I think the vast majority of Ohioans want fair and free elections.
That might be one of the most important roles in one of the most important states for some of the most important elections.
Yes, it is a very big, important job that many people don't know anything about, which, is slightly terrifying, but also is an opportunity to talk more about what this job does. It's a statewide office. It's on the ballot when the gubernatorial race happens every 4 years. And it is incredibly important if you care about having government that is accountable and transparent. The way that we do that in this democracy is through your vote. And the Secretary of State's job should be to be an advocate for you as a voter and to ensure that you are able to have your voice heard at the ballot.
What do you say in the office? Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Yes.
So elections happen on average
every year.
And then there's different ballot issues that show up every year. The major elections are every 2 years. In between the actual elections, what all is the Secretary of State doing?
Well, first of all, there are elections every single year because our local elections happen in odd years.
Right.
And our state, countywide, sometimes presidential elections happen in the even years. So there really are no off years or off periods of time. You will have small gaps of months, but the election calendar is going continually year after year, year round, because even in local elections, you will have primary elections, you will have a general election, you could have special elections, levy issues, for example, that come up. So it is a continual work that happens from the Office of the Secretary of State. Everything from, how do candidates qualify to be on the ballot, campaign finance issues, in terms of resources that are given to our boards of elections, poll worker training. Do they have the resources, for the materials that are needed to administer the election? Advocating in front of this state legislature, because while the Secretary of State is the chief elections officer, it is the state legislature that creates the rules around election through laws that are passed. And unfortunately, with this legislature, they are very adversarial to voting. And so it is, how are you advocating in front of this legislature, hopefully for voting and for voters, not against them? That's not what we've had currently. But that is a big part of the job as well. On top of there are other business services that the Secretary of State does that are less exciting, less sexy, but also very important.
Will you make the entire staff refer to you as Madam Secretary?
Maybe. I like that title.
It's a really good title.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great show too.
The primary election, by the time that this episode airs, we're going to be really close to that.
Yeah.
When is the primary election?
The primary elections for all of these statewide offices, state house races, some county races, will be on May 5th, Tuesday, May 5th. Early voting starts on Tuesday, April 7th, because we have 4 weeks of early voting that you can go to your Board of Elections. But importantly, the last day to register to vote, for people who may not be registered, aren't sure, is April 6th. In Ohio, unfortunately, voters are locked out 30 days before the election. If they have not registered within that time period, they are not eligible to vote in the next election. So we want to make sure people are registered to vote, that you check your voter registration, but you can start early vote on April 7th.
And the election will be on Cinco de Mayo.
Yes, that's right. I didn't even think about that.
And
yes.
hopefully we get a nice Latino show up at the polls.
Or have some margaritas, one of the two.
Hopefully you'll be celebrating with a margarita at the end of the night, right? Yeah. So you're running against, you have one Democrat who's running against you in the primary, right. Brian Hambly. What can you tell us about your opponent? And I say opponent loosely because I realize you guys have also...
I make it a practice not to talk about opponents. I've been in primaries before, in general races. My job is to talk about me. I would say for me, the biggest distinction and what I bring to the table is experience. And it's experience in my time serving in the legislature, working on some of these election issues, voting issues, really in the trenches and some of the biggest fights that we've had in the state in terms of defending direct democracy, defending the power of the people. I was very deeply involved in fighting against that 60% threshold in that August special election in 2023. Yeah. This job is too important to not have that experience brought to the table and to be ready on day one to do this work, because we're in a real fight for our democracy. I will be ready on day one to do this work and be a firewall to some of these attacks that we are seeing, both from our own state legislature, but also now more and more from this president and a federal administration that seems hell-bent on interfering with our elections and taking over our election process.
When this releases, we'll be very close to that primary election. Right now, we're still in February. Actually, we just had the Super Bowl. great question. What was your favorite part of the Turning Point USA Kid Rock concert?
Well, I did not tune into that one.
Oh.
I am an actual Bad Bunny fan.
But he only speaks Spanish. I couldn't understand anything he was saying.
The language of music is universal. So I watched the halftime show. I will say it was the most boring Super Bowl otherwise.
Yes, it was. Jokes aside, I went into it going, I don't know anything about Bad Bunny. I know of him. I've heard some of his music. It isn't really my thing. I'm all about people having their own taste and choice. That's not what the Kid Rock thing was about. But then I ended up enjoying the hell out of it. I was like, that was spectacular.
It was a great show.
And like
it
the
was a great
visual
show.
storytelling with the music and everything else.
Yeah. And there's Ricky Martin,
Yeah.
Lady Gaga. I mean, what's not to love?
It was actually great. Okay, so then moving forward, let's say you get through the primary, right? All goes well. You have the big election coming up. In Ohio especially, this is the big election. One of the people we've had on the show earlier this season was Dr. Acton. Do you have a relationship?
First of all, we have very similar backgrounds in that we're both trained in public health. She went the clinical medicine route. I went the practice route. So a little bit different.
Practice route.
Yeah. We're both doctors, but she's a real doctor. I'm just the study doctor.
Practice in theory. I get it.
Practice in theory. When she was the health director, it was during my time in the legislature. I was the ranking member on the health committee and served on a number of committees during both her time as the health director, but also when COVID began. And so I had interactions with her certainly throughout that period of time because of, some of the things we were navigating. In the legislature, there was a real push by the supermajority to take powers away from the governor, which was a really interesting position for me to be in as a Democrat because I was defending the governor, who's not my party. So it was a very strange place. But so I got to know her a little bit there, and then have certainly known her after she stepped back from that role.
One of the questions I asked her, what happens when something comes down from the federal asking you to do something you don't believe in? And one of the roles that she said, I need to make sure I have a very good Secretary of State.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people don't understand this. Just because the federal government says, so a president, for example, says, I want you, state, to hand over your voting files. They can only do that if Congress has given them the authority through federal legislation.
Well, that hasn't stopped them before.
No, but, a federal agency just, can't up and demand information or for the state to do something without the authority to do it. And, what we need, Republican or Democrat, but people in statewide offices, in state legislatures, when we see that there is this amount of overreach that this administration in particular has been displaying over the last couple of months, especially, is, you've got to have people in these offices who have a backbone and the courage to say, no. Just because you demand it, you don't have the authority to have it. And our Constitution is pretty clear about that in many respects. And, so it's why it's so important, especially in the Secretary of State role, in the governor's role, in the Attorney General's role, to have people who are going to be that firewall to overreach, whether it come from the federal government or it even comes from this legislature. And this legislature is well known for overreach as well.
Yeah. Well, then how hurt are your feelings going to be if you end up like Wes Moore and not invited to the governor's dinner?
Well, yeah, so sad for him. Probably not very sad. So.
Oh.
I fully anticipate I will not be invited. Although I do wonder where this dinner will be held because the West Wing has been torn down. So I'm not entirely sure where. Well, I guess the big
Epstein Island. I don't know.
Ballroom that allegedly will be built, or at the Trump Center. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mar-a-Lago. There's lots of great, wonderful places it could be.
Sure. If you're into that sort of thing.
I want to stay diplomatic here. Okay. Your critics, I know some of the people have said, contrary to what you just said, she caves to Republicans, like with the redistricting map.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
First of all, I vehemently disagree with that. I think what I have learned in the, serving the super minority and I was the House Minority Leader for 3.5 years. What you learn is, you can fight the principled fight, but then sometimes there are moments where you have to be very strategic about the fight so that you can keep fighting for another day, for another year, and you keep moving the ball forward. And that is, I think from the outside, there's a role for advocacy and activism. But when you are in these roles where you have to govern and you have to be strategic, sometimes you have to make a decision that's not a great decision, but it's the less bad of the two really bad decisions. And for me, in 2023, I have to think about the years because I went through so many rounds of this. In 2023, after having gone through 5 rounds of redistricting with a majority in 2022 who clearly was not going to follow the rule of law, they were not going to follow court orders, and the circumstances in 2023 changed to they now had full control of the Supreme Court. That was not going to hold them accountable anymore. They would again be able to have the pen to redraw in 2 more years if we couldn't come to some sort of agreement where they would be able to draw even worse maps again. I made the decision, and the other Democrat who served with me on that commission, because the circumstances had changed and we wanted to be able to keep fighting to try to find some compromise so that we had a pathway to continue to gain seats in the legislature, which was critically important, take the pen permanently out of their hands and give the citizens an opportunity to go back to the ballot to change the process so the politicians were completely removed from it.
I want to just touch on that again for one moment, because I think it's really important. People outside of the State House, people outside of politics, I understand, because we've all been those people who are like, why are you even playing their game? Dig your heels in, say, I will not move, you move. But the importance of being pragmatic with your approach and to diplomacy and tact, and why that is so important, because keeping your cool in those situations and taking the little wins while you keep your eye on the prize, that is such a huge part of what you guys do on a daily basis.
It is. And listen, I am down for a good fight. I'm always down for a good fight.
You're a hockey mom. Of course
that's right.
You are.
And down for a principled fight. But there are moments, and you learn this, there are moments where, yes, you can take the principled stand and, fight till the very end, but it's not actually going to get you anywhere. And in fact, will harm your ability to keep fighting in the next month, in the next year. And so you have to be able to recognize when that is the situation and rethink how you're going to approach the fight. It's not that you stop fighting, you're just doing it in a different way that allows you to fight smarter as you continue to go along. And so and that is something that comes with experience also in this work. But it is, from the outside, that is sometimes hard to see. And so it's incumbent upon us to explain that. And, I try to do that. I always tell people, you may not agree with me on every vote that I take, but you can trust that I'm going to be open and transparent and tell you why I did this and explain it.
Your end goal is ultimately to make sure to serve the people the best you can. And sometimes that means
That's right.
taking some small losses.
That's right. And in the case of, the vote that I had to take in 2023, the strategic importance of that was, number one, we actually, the House Democrats, we actually ended up picking 2 additional seats in a very unfavorable election year, 2024, when everyone else lost. We managed to pick up 2 seats, which was incredibly important, because what that did, and a lot of people don't understand the nuances of the rules of the legislature, but what that did was it allowed us to reestablish what is known as the citizen referendum process. So the Republicans now can't get above a certain threshold of votes, which means that if a law passes, like rolling back some of the provisions of the cannabis law that citizens passed through ballot initiative in 2023, when the legislature oversteps and the public gets really mad, then the public still has the right to referendum that legislation. So that's what's happening with cannabis right now. They're collecting signatures to then put it before voters and say, do you agree with this law or not? Yes or no, and vote it down. If we had not gained those 2 seats in 2024 because of the vote that I had to take, that option would not be available to us. And that's an important win. Yeah. That's an important piece of power to reestablish. Again, when we are dealing with operators who we know are not going to follow the rule of law, not going to follow the Constitution, and they have a Supreme Court at the moment that will essentially rubber stamp anything that comes out of this legislature.
From a human standpoint, emotionally and mentally, because I know there's no hate, right? You don't hate these people who you have to fight against in Columbus, right? But when you see somebody vote against something that is so simple and so decent.
Should be, yeah.
How do you go back the next day and still see them as a colleague and still see them as somebody who you can collaborate with?
Yeah, that has been tough. I mean, there have been a number of votes over the years where I just cannot understand, just from a human level, why some of my colleagues vote the way that they do, especially those that are self-professed Christians and religious people, because I grew up in the Christian faith as well. And, I know what my Jesus and my Bible have taught me about how we care and love our neighbors, and we care for the least among us. And it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, there have been moments on the floor where I have walked off and, shed a few tears because I just am, so frustrated just as a person. But, I also remember that, I'm there to get things done. And that means that sometimes I have to move past that and figure out how can I keep working with people, understanding who they are, and having relationships, oftentimes with people who I absolutely do not agree with on a lot of things. Because, again, it's about that. We have to have these conversations and try to find some common ground to at least be able to do a little good in this very unfavorable environment.
So Ohio's current secretary is Frank LaRose. His family is well known for owning the beer distributor House of LaRose. You had mentioned...
Although he's now my constituent.
Yes, I was going to say you live by House of LaRose.
Uh-huh.
Like his actual house.
Uh-huh. Yeah, like we're neighbors, one street over.
I heard you also have other constituents that are John Husted and Vivek Ramaswamy himself.
That's right. Although Mr. Ramaswamy just bought an even bigger mansion in another neighborhood, so he will no longer be my constituent.
Ah,
yeah.
Are you going to miss him?
No. But yes, I have some very interesting constituents.
You had mentioned earlier that you had to sue Frank LaRose. Is it because he messed up your beer order?
No. In 2022, as part of this redistricting process that happened, and we went through 5 rounds of redistricting that year, not surprisingly, every time a new map would get introduced by the majority on the commission, and Frank LaRose was on the commission as well, they would mysteriously draw our candidates because the filing deadline for candidates to run was before these maps were released, they'd mysteriously draw them right out of districts. It should be that the clock starts over for the candidate qualification process, but we were getting stonewalled in the Secretary of State's office. And so we had to take him to court over 2 different circumstances to ensure that we had candidates qualified for the ballot. And the Supreme Court ruled in our favor at that point. And that is how, we got Dr. Anita Samani qualified to run for office. She's an OBGYN. Literally, we got her qualified. That case was decided the afternoon that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And so it was poetic justice that had happened that way.
My God. And for a state that I think a lot of people think is very red, we passed the abortion protection and
Correct.
we passed the cannabis in the
Yes,
same thing,
in
which was
2023.
huge.
Yeah, which speaks to, again, when we look at the actions of this legislature, and where most Ohioans actually are on a number of issues, whether it's cannabis legalization, it's access to abortion, it is how we fund our public schools, a number of issues. This legislature is very out of whack with the rest of the state. And so fortunately in the state, in Ohio, we have access to direct democracy. So when the citizens get frustrated enough, they can collect signatures and put issues on the ballot, which is what they did for reproductive rights and for cannabis, or they can do a referendum process and within a certain number of days and actually overturn legislation that they don't like. And that's a very, very powerful tool. Not every state has that, but those tools only work if you have people in statewide office, like the Secretary of State, like the Attorney General, who actually abide by the Constitution and the laws that dictate that right and how people go about obtaining that right. And what we've seen from the Secretary of State as it relates to citizen-led ballot initiatives is using the power of his office when he doesn't agree with the ballot initiative to try to prevent those citizens from having their voice heard. And so the most egregious example was in 2024 with the redistricting amendment, confusing the ballot language that voters saw when they went into the voting booth, so the people didn't know, were they voting for gerrymandering or against gerrymandering. He actually did the same thing in 2023 with the reproductive rights amendment and put very interesting language in that description in an effort to kill that ballot initiative as well.
So on a grading scale of D to F, how would you rate Mr. LaRose?
Oh, I would give him an F for Frank.
Well, that's very diplomatic. I like that.
Yeah.
If Democrats don't win the seat of Secretary of State, what might that look like?
Well, I think what we will continue to see is using the Secretary of State office to both make it less convenient to access your voting rights, more voter registration cancellations, which is something we've seen an enormous increase of under the Secretary of State. And in terms of this access to direct democracy, continued attacks on that right that citizens have, so that, again, there will not be this check on power that we should have as citizens, both through our vote, but also through direct democracy when our elected representatives don't respond to what it is that we want them to do.
Let's pretend for a moment that, let's say, Dr. Acton wins the governor's seat. Let's say you were to become Secretary of State, but the Democrats in the General Assembly are still a super minority.
And that could very well happen. Although there is a path for them to get out of it, but that could very well happen. Yes.
Do you still have power as the Secretary of State?
Yes. Yes. I mean, listen, I fully anticipate if Democrats win, when Democrats win in November, we will have probably the most egregious attack on executive powers that we've seen in a long time. We saw this play out in Wisconsin, for example, from that period of election to the end of the General Assembly. We call that lame duck. We probably will see a number of ways that this majority will try to roll back powers of both the governor and some of these other constitutional statewide offices. And we have to be prepared for that and figure out how we're going to respond to that as well. But yes, I mean, there is still power that both the governor has as well as the Secretary of State to keep moving the ball forward and to be the firewall, the guardrails to this legislature.
We've talked a little bit about how some of the federal decisions impact people across the country, even at the state level. there's some obvious things that might happen, and one of them being ICE. Right now, there was the threat of ICE being sent to Springfield. It didn't end up happening. Springfield already had issues because of the election and using them as a scapegoat about their eating pets, and it destroyed that town in a lot of ways. Even before the election, what happens if ICE comes into Ohio and starts doing some very unconstitutional things to your constituents?
Yeah. That is something I think we all have to be prepared for. And, especially as it relates to voting. And we've seen people like Steve Bannon already say, I should come in and be present at polling locations. I mean, this is a form of voter intimidation, is what it is, pure and simple. It's voter intimidation. And I think that, we have to be prepared, number one, to speak out, to push back. My colleagues in the House and I have introduced a number of bills that, may not move forward in the supermajority legislature, but we think that it is important to reassert our power as states because, again, the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, is very clear about state power versus federal power. And some federal powers only exist when Congress gives the federal government the authority to do things. And, so pushing back on a number of things, reestablishing some of those civil rights, that should be obvious, but we should make sure that they're clear in law. The humanity of how we treat people who are detained, making sure that they have basic access to food and shelter. For me, I've been really focused on this data privacy issue as we're seeing a federal government demand more and more personal data from states, which again, they do not have the authority to have, that violate not only state law, but also federal law, like the Federal Privacy Act. And so it is moving this conversation to say this is federal overreach. And everyone should be concerned about federal overreach, no matter what your party affiliation is. And we need to reassert our power as states, and we have a vested interest in ensuring that we're protecting our citizens.
Possibly the most important issue, which is top of mind right now in a lot of people, is trying to nationalize the vote. I don't want to belabor that and spend too much time on it, but seeing that the Secretary of State oversees that, a lot of people probably don't really understand what that means.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me like I'm 5?
Yeah, sure. I'll try. Although you may have to be 8 or 9 to understand.
I'll be 8. Okay. I'll be 8.
I have a 9-year-old, so I can explain it that way. What we've seen the Trump say now multiple times is he wants to nationalize the elections, which essentially means he wants the federal government to take over the election process. That is deeply concerning because, number one, the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, is very clear that the administration of our elections is a state duty. Congress can certainly pass federal legislation that, creates standards for how we have to operate with voter registration, et cetera. But it is a state duty. And in the state of Ohio, we do this at the county level. It's actually our county boards of elections that, they're the ones who recruit the poll workers, all of those things. And so that's deeply concerning because it creates a scenario. And, part of the reason why our founding fathers established it this way to decentralize the election process was because they feared election interference and a king or a dictator, essentially taking over the election process and not letting individual citizens have their voice heard. What we've also seen is some agencies of the Trump administration, so the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, demand access to voter file data, unredacted voter file data, which includes sensitive information like Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, because what they want to do is collect it at the federal level and they be the ones that determine who gets kicked off the rolls or not. And so they have absolutely no authority to have this data. Congress has not given them the authority to have this data. So there have been a number of secretaries of states in several states that have said, no, We are not handing this over to you. We've seen in the state of Minnesota, the Department of Homeland Security say, we're not going to leave the state of Minnesota unless you hand over these voter files. And they've said no. And in every case that this has been challenged through a lawsuit in the federal courts, federal judges have said, sorry, Department of Justice, sorry, Department of Homeland Security, you do not have the authority to have these data, and the states don't have to turn it over. So again, that's just another example of why having a Secretary of State in place who is going to, number one, have the backbone and the courage to stand up to this administration that seems, again, hell-bent on interference, federal overreach, is going to be even more important after 2026 as we head into the 2028 election cycle.
It sounds like Trump is just trying to streamline things and get rid of those pesky checks and balances that get in the way.
You know, I mean, if the election results are not what he thinks that they should be, they obviously are wrong and full of fraud.
That is a true statement. Your famous brothers, Joe and Anthony Russo, are bringing Avengers Doomsday to the screen this year. What superhero do you play in the movie?
Superwoman. Is she an Avenger? I should know this.
She's not, but
yeah, who?
But if you're a Russo, I think you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, they used to accidentally get tagged on formerly Twitter, now X, for my stuff and vice versa, which was always really comical to me. And a couple of times they actually responded to it, but we are not related, although I will claim them if they will share some of the royalties and profits from their work.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. Am I really cool that I don't? What is a female Avenger? I get them all confused. My boys are going to be like so... They're going to be so embarrassed.
You want to make them proud. So the Avengers would be like, well, some of the female characters aren't around
Wonder
anymore.
Woman is not.
No, that's Justice League.
Yeah.
Captain Marvel?
Yeah, Captain America?
Yes, he's in it.
But what about female? I want a strong female character.
Captain Marvel is kind of the strongest female in that whole thing.
Oh, Captain Marvel is a she. Okay. Yeah. Again, my boys will be super embarrassed by this.
Look, it's bad enough you got involved in public service, but this we cannot forgive.
This is
egregious. Is you rage baiting them. That's fine.
This is egregious.
Where can people find more information about you and your campaign?
Certainly you can visit my website at Allison, Allison, the only correct way to spell it, Russo, RUSSO.com. I'm on all the social media channels, Russo, my last name, 4 Ohio. And, can follow me on all of those platforms. I rarely post on X these days because I do think it is a troll farm and it's just not a great place to be at the moment. So we'll put a couple of things there, but mostly it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, those places.
Maybe that's where the governor's dinner is being held, is on X.
It's
anytime
possible.
Elon does a live event, it goes really well.
I hear he's a big donor to the big, beautiful ballroom, so maybe so.
I believe it.
Yeah.
He's a great guy, wonderful human. Okay, final question. What was it like to work with Danny DeVito and Get Short? Oh, damn it. It's still Rene Russo question. Let me just say this. Thank you for being a great sport today. I could not ruffle your feathers. It's been a genuine pleasure to chat with you, and I appreciate your candor and your willingness to keep fighting the fight that so many of us couldn't do. I joke that I'm selfish. That's why I couldn't go into politics. I couldn't go into politics because I would die on every hill. And I think there's a lot of people like that. And that's not a bad thing, but it also doesn't move the ball. As somebody who could be one of your constituents, it's really important to have those people up there who know when to die on a hill and when to accept the small wins or even take a small defeat. So thank you for doing that. And in a lot of ways, you are kind of a superhero. I think anybody who goes into public service for the reason to serve the public and actually keeps fighting those fights, there is something innate in you that is not in everyone. And I don't want you to forget that on those tough days when you're crying or going home and you need to punch something. That said, this is your final question. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
It would be for people to tell me everything that's in their mind and what they're actually thinking. Yes. It would be, I'd pull the real truth out of people's
You'd
heads.
regret that really fast.
I don't know. Sometimes I think I may already have that superpower. I used to joke that, people would just tell me the most random personal things, it's great, but it's also been it's put me in some very weird situations sometimes as well. But it's helpful, especially in public service, getting people to tell you what they're actually thinking and the truth. And those things that are going through their head is helpful.
It's definitely a double-edged sword, and I've experienced it too, but there's something beautiful about people seeing you as a safe person, as vulnerable and curious, and they will share with you because there's this energy you give off and they will pick it up. And then I'm sure you've heard this a million times. I've never said that out loud. I can't believe I just told you that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I will take that.
And by the way, you can label that as telepathy.
Okay.
And Professor X is part of the X-Men, but technically I think part of the bigger Avengers.
Okay.
So
I just got educated on this. Again, my boys are going to be mortified that I do not know this.
Thank you so much for taking the time out today to do this in the middle of a very busy campaign. And to all of you out there, go out and use your superpowers, which is your voice. Go out and vote. Show up on May 5th for the primary election, and then you have to go use your voices again in November. We have the power as the people to make changes. And really, this isn't about red or blue, Democrat, Republican. This is about what serves all of us the best. And we'll see you next time.
We just went there. Now you can go to thegoingtherepodcast.com for links to all the podcast platforms, our socials, and of course, YouTube. While you're at it, give us a rating, share with a friend, and subscribe.
This podcast is brought to you in part by its host and Frame One Media, in association with Kaylee Williams, Joe Calley, and Bobby Thomas.